You are now watching The Lone Blown. Blown! Yo, what's poppin' YouTube? You're back here watching The Lone Blown. Thanks so much for coming back. And today we're going to be going over Centiskorch VMAX, one of the coolest new VMAX Pokemon. Now, I've already covered Centiskorch VMAX, I should say, not just VMAX, Centiskorch VMAX on this channel before, but that was for our Team Up to Darkness Ablaze post-rotation format. This is for the Atlas 2020 POG Championships. That's going to be taking place in August. It's a PTCGO online event that's basically replacing our World Championships. So I want to try to cover as many of the decks that I think are viable on this channel completely for free, so you all have an opportunity to learn about these decks. So starting off with Centiskorch, with its GMAX Centiferno, or GMAX Centiferno, it's doing 40 plus 40 for each energy that's attached to the Centiskorch VMAX. That's cool. This deck largely becomes a Welder deck, which I should probably switch this Welder to a rotation value of 4. Let's do that, because there are 4 copies of Welder in this deck. My bad on that. It's a little bit difficult to use Tabletop Simulator at once, especially when we're banging out these deck profiles. If you haven't got the chance, be sure to subscribe to the channel to find other deck profiles and just whatever y'all want to going on for Pokemon. I mean, I've said it a few times. Check it out. Follow along. So with the GMAX Centiferno, 40 plus 40 for each fire energy attached to it. So it is scalable. It does have semi-infinite damage that you could be doing. I mean, it's limited to the amount of energies that you play in deck and damage modifiers, but it's not an attack that caps out at 150 damage that you cannot scale against. This means that this Pokemon can knock out other Pokemon that just have a decent bit of HP, so you can knock out a Pikachu Zekrom GX. They're chilling pretty at 240 HP. That's not too difficult to knock out. You could scale up enough to knock out the opposing Eternatus VMAX, which we'll actually play against in this video. Or actually not against in this video. We're gonna play against Control in this video. No leaks. So playing against Control in this video. So the damage doesn't really necessarily matter in that case, but in matchups such as Eternatus, it can matter. We have Jirachi. Jirachi is going to allow us to just make their deck a little bit more consistent, especially as a Welder deck. Volcanion, we could power up our Centiskorch VMAX. It also helps against cards such as TCG. We have Heatran-GX. I know a lot of lists do not play Heatran-GX. I really like the synergy between GMAX Centiferno, an attack that loads up a lot of energy. I mean, you load up 1 energy per turn at the end of GMAX Centiferno, whatever. It's more that Centiskorch VMAX has 320 plus HP because of Heat Fire Energy. It's really not getting knocked out in 1 hit, which means it is going to be a bank of fire energies. Heatran-GX can swoop in, and that's how you can knock out an Eternatus VMAX, or even just an opposing Centiskorch VMAX. For most fire-type Welder decks, I do like Dedenne-GX. Dedenne-GX allows us to just go through our deck, make sure that we have it all going on. Crobat V is just an extension of that if we need to fight for it. Eldegoss V, for me, is largely taken over Palpad in these kinds of decks, because we could just get back our Welder or get that boss order for game. One cool thing that this list does play is Wondrous Labyrinth. This is heavily based off the Japanese list that I've seen. It did well at the Japanese National Championships. So the list there played Wondrous Lab, and it's because GMAX Centiferno, you get that extra energy at the end, and it only costs 2 energies, so you could really put your opponent in a tough spot. Currently, I don't play Heat Factory Prism Star in this deck. That is something that I'm like, do I want to play 3 stadiums? Is that something that makes sense in this deck? I'm still trying to figure that out, but it is a card that I am considering as well. Giant Hearth is a staple. We need fire energies to use Welder. Welder's a staple. We need Welder to use Welder. Just attaching fire energies in general and making sure that we're able to power up our Pokemon, draw a few cards. Since this deck does not play Ninetales like a fire toolbox deck, we want to have boss orders so we could bring up Pokemon that we want to knock out, or bring up Pokemon that are interesting for us to just bring up. I mean, boss orders is a staple card, kind of took over the need for Ninetales in my opinion, especially since this deck has GMAX Centiferno and can self-accelerate itself a little bit. It really doesn't need the Ninetales in my opinion. We got 4 copies of Quick Ball. I mean, we are a VMAX deck, so we need to get out our basic Pokemon, then to evolve. So our Centiskorch V. And I mean, I guess we didn't even go over Centiskorch V. I think it's an interesting card because you could discard your opponent's energy with the first attack. So if your opponent, unfortunately, doesn't know what you're playing against, or if they don't entirely know if they're not well versed on Centiskorch V, for example, and attach the energy to the active, they can get absolutely bopped there, especially if it's a deck that matters for attaching energy, such as ADPization, Eternatus VMAX, and then Burning Train is just a fine 184 energy attack. I mean, on the second turn of the game, it's very possible for you to knock out something like a Crobat V, so that's cool. Jumping back into Pokemon Communication, Pokemon Communication is really what we need to be having a VMAX deck. We don't really want to play Evolution Incense. We don't have Mysterious Treasure like Dragapult VMAX. Pokemon Communication is where it's at. If we didn't have enough card or Pokemon in this deck, so right now I'm doing a quick count, 7, 10, 13, 15, 16, 17 Pokemon. I think 17 Pokemon. 17 Pokemon meets my threshold of like after 14 for Pokemon Communication. 14 is cutting it a little low in my opinion, but I think that Pokemon Communication is just necessary for this deck to search out Centiskorch VMAX. On the plus side, it also makes it more efficient for things like searching out Dedenne-GX earlier if you don't need a Centiskorch VMAX, or just making the deck more consistent. If you're playing a deck that does need to have both basics and evolution Pokemon or VMAX Pokemon searched out, and you don't have a lot of Pokemon, I would recommend playing Pokeball. Now, that's not a meme or anything like that, it's just Pokeball seems to be one of the best ways to search out Pokemon in our current format. We've lost Ultra Ball into our expanded format, so I think it's one of those things where it's really helpful out there. Switch, we have Jirachi, we have Pokemon with larger trait costs, it's a no-brainer here. Pokegear, I think it's interesting right now. I might actually end up cutting a copy of Pokegear, or even adding a copy of Pokegear. It's a card that I'm like, I either want to play 2, 3, or 4, and 3 is usually not it. So I know that this list isn't perfect. I mean, it looks really good, and it plays really well. I just don't know how I feel about the Pokegear count right now, and that's more maybe it's the way that I nitpick at decks. Pokegear is really meant for us to search out Welder, but we can use it late game to get out boss orders as well. Got a couple copies of Fire Crystal. I'm always one of those players that's a little bit worried about Fire Energies getting into the discard pile, especially after an early Dedenne-GX. Maybe that's a mistake when it comes to this deck, because of GMAX Sendinferno being able to get back energy. But I do like the fact that you could just go Fire Crystal, pitch things in your discard pile, keep it as an energy bank, and then welder those energies. As Vikavolt becomes poised to become one of our best decks in format, I'm not entirely sure if Fire Crystal is going to make sense in this deck anyways. It's just going to require more testing, and I might do an updated deck profile or deck profiles with an S video that will update things closer as we get to the Atlas POG 2020. Hyper Potion. This was another thing that I saw on the Japanese list. Hyper Potion allowing us to heal our Centiskorch VMAX. I mean, if we're building up energies with GMAX Sendinferno, every 2 turns, we are getting a free Hyper Potion, essentially, because we've attached those 2 energies back. I think that it's a great way to keep Centiskorch VMAX alive, and if Centiskorch VMAX is just alive forever, you are winning the game. Escape Board, this is mainly for Jirachi. There are some spooky things out there, such as Magcargo, Mareep, or Sleepy Slugs, as they like to call it. That would stop you from attacking is because you're asleep. So I mean, Escape Board has some dual functionality there, but mainly it's for Jirachi when it puts itself asleep with Stellar Wish. We got a copy of 10 copies of Fire, not a copy. That's basically just to make Welder work. It's a fire type deck. It needs a lot of energies, especially if you're discarding them and you scale your damage with it. And I decided to go with 3 heat fire energy. I'm always worried about Welder because you can't Welder on a heat fire energy as per the text, because it's only a fire energy when it's attached to a fire Pokemon. Or maybe just a Pokemon. I think it's just a Pokemon. Anyways, it gives us plus 20 HP. I think that's kind of cool. There's situations where your opponent might misplay into thinking that they get a knockout, where they're just like, oh, Heatran has 190 printed on it, they forget about the extra 20. That can give you an extra attack or an extra in the moment thing. It's one of those like out in the open trap cards, or like when you see players who you have a power plan play and they drop a Dedenne-GX, you want to scream out so loud, to stop them while they're in the moment. But then you're like, once they play it, you're like, no, don't draw any cards, don't draw any cards. And you want to make sure that they don't go any further, that they don't draw any prize cards or anything like that. I just mean that the Heat Fire Energy will give you an extra turn for your attacks. So this is what we got for the deck. Is it perfect? I mean, I really like this list. I think this list is kind of hot. We'll see how it goes in the next portion of this video. We're going to be playing against a control deck, the Magcargo Mareep deck. And I actually think that this is going to be okay against that deck. And my reason why that it's going to be okay against that deck is because we can evolve out of a sleep, which is a huge thing. And we can potentially stop them with Wondrous Labyrinth, especially when they're using something like Guru. And we could use boss orders to bring up Zacian V that they're going to use to draw extra cards. So overall, I think that we can do okay. We also have a decent bit of switching cards for Switch to Escape Boards. So as long as we're like okay on our resources, don't fall into any crazy traps, the matchups shouldn't be terrible. So let's jump in there, see exactly what we got going on. Alright, so we can see that I got set up here with the Centiskorch, and I'm going first. Mike starts with Giraffe Rig. Shout out to Mike again, Mike Gibbs, for doing this video. I'm attaching a Heat Fire, and knowing that I'm playing against a control, I'm just going to flip my hand over here and play so we could watch the game from Mike's perspective. So he's going in with a Cynthia and Caitlin, discarding card. And he's going to go in and go Pokemon Communication, put something back, probably just going to grab a Slugma here. Yeah, there's Slugma, shuffle his deck, and then send up the Lily's Pokédoll and draw some cards with Intrepid Sword. So I'm going to flip my hand back over here, and we're going to go in with a Giant Hearth. Now, I don't necessarily want to go in with Giant Hearth yet, but the biggest reason why I went in with it, because I want to thin my deck out a little bit, go in with potentially a Welder. And here I'm just like, yeah, I can discard a Fire since I have the Fire Crystal. Let's go, search through the deck. Just going to grab a Dedenne-GX in case it does not play out the way that I want. I just want to be able to use Burning Train this turn. So I did get the Welder. So there's the Fire Crystal, getting a Fire Energy back, Welder those two on. And there's a Fire Energy. I'm like, you want to know what? They can't really do too much damage to me at all. I'm just going to hit for enough damage here. So trying to place out, it's hard to place all the energies when you're doing things, but turn 2 180 is not bad. Don't draw a prize card because it's a Lily's Pokédoll, but whatever, it's not a big deal. Okay, so Mike's gonna instantly just take away my Slumbering Forest, and I mean that's cool. Slumbering Forest is exactly what makes this deck work for control, especially with the Mareep. Seeing a Pokemon Communication, putting the card back on top of the deck, making sure that he shuffles it, grabbing the Magcargo, and he's going in as well with the Smooth Over. So just allowing himself to get set up. And he could either draw it one of two ways. He could either use a Rangaroo to swap the top card of his deck, the Rangaroo from Sword and Shield that is, or use Zacian V to draw. So there's his 3 cards. And I drew a Wondrous Lab, and I'm like, hey, you wanna know what? That's not too bad. I just really don't know what I want to do here. I'm just like debating if it makes sense for me to get rid of Slumbering Forest, get rid of Slumbering Forest in a future turn, and I'm just like, you wanna know what? Let's just go for the attack. Not really worried about an Articuno when it comes to the Magcargo version of this deck. More or less, it's just straight chillin'. So he's going back in with a Pal Pad. And we're going to see. That's a Quick Ball, discarding a Pokemon Communication. Just to grab the Mareep. So I think Mike's at the point in the game where he's like, Zach's knocking out my stuff. I can't really get set up here. What exactly is my best course of action? Let's try to make it a sleep. Let's try to force him to find the Centiskorch VMAX. I think that's exactly what Mike's trying to do here. Just going in, making sure that he does everything correctly. It's not always the easiest to use Tabletop Simulator when you're going through such an extensive search deck. So what do we got here? I'm going to flip Flip, tails, just another one. Big yikes, so we're still asleep, but that's okay. We did get a Pokemon Communication. So I can go Pokemon Communication just to go for the Centiskorch VMAX. No issues at all there. I just want to get the knockout, and I will draw a prize card, flipping my hand back over to what Mike's got going on. Here, I'm not worried about getting knocked out. At least I don't believe I should be worried about getting knocked out. Out of all the Japanese lists that we've seen from the Japanese National Championships and other lists floating around online, it's something that we just haven't really seen a lot of. Just attacking Pokemon in the Magcargo deck. So I'd honestly, especially considering I have 340 HP. So there's my Wondrous Lab going to the Lost Zone just for another Slumbering Forest. I'm just trying to outpace Mike when it comes to stadium cards here. He's going to retreat, make me asleep, try to make me asleep as much as possible. And my whole goal in this matchup is to try to get around that while he tries to get set up. So I'm asleep. That's okay. So I know that at the very least I should be able to retreat my Centiskorch V here. And I'm just going to go search out a couple Fire Energies. I have to discard a Welder, which kind of sucks. But I will Welder on there and draw some cards. And I'm like, you want to know what do I entirely do with something like this? I'm going to discard the Volcanion, grab out a Heatran-GX, and I'm going to use its ability. I'm just double counting, making sure that my Wondrous Lab still doesn't play or anything like that. I'm going to switch all that, send up the Heatran, get the knockout on the Mareep, which again gets me another turn. And I'm feeling good about my hand. I could always get a Crobat V, I could always get an Eldegoss. I could still get a Dedenne-GX. I have options, and that's the most important thing that I have going on, is that I have options. So you can see that Mike's just like, okay, we're gonna get set up. We need to start putting some resources back into our deck, because he's kind of ran out of Pokemon that we can kind of chill with. It's kind of just like, no more Lily's Pokédoll, no more nothing of that. Gonna get back a couple Slumbering Forest there. And he's going to decide on the third card he wants to grab. I think we just decide that Lily's Pokédoll is important. And then those cards are just going to... Oh, he decided to switch one. And he's just like, oh, I got to put them at the bottom of my deck. Right. Just a little bit of a learning process. So I'm just like, okay, cool. We got the heads because it's only one flip because there's no Slumbering Forest in play. And I'm just like, what exactly do I do here? There's probably no reason for me to do too much, but if I can get a boss orders, I wouldn't mind just hitting on that Zacian B so that I could draw some prize cards. You're having some fun with the shuffle with the flip and the control R function. It looks really fun. So there's a Crobat. I'm like, yeah, let's draw some cards. And I'm like, you want to know what? Maybe I don't want to go boss order yet. I just got to worry about if he were to ever use Bellaba. So I'm just like, I'm going to take the free attack on the active Pokemon. And here he's just like, okay, I'm going to shuffle my hand into my deck, retain Liza. Now, if you're playing this on your own, you could always just use Control-G, hover over the cards that you want to group together. Then you could flip those face down, put them on top of your deck, and then use R to shuffle your deck. So that's a good way to draw things. Now, this is a great... there's a lot of scripted things in here. I honestly forget who the creator was. I stumbled upon it when it came on... when it came upon the workshops, and whoever did this did an amazing job. So what's going on here? So I am asleep still. Got the big tails there. And I'm just like, how in the world am I going to get out of here? I mean, I have the switch into the Centiskorch VMAX that's going to allow me to just knock out this Zacian V. Seems good enough. So far, like, it seems like it's a really good matchup. I've played around asleep as much as possible. I've gone through my deck. I think I've played this matchup out as well as we possibly could. And it's just to the point of where I'm not entirely sure what Mike could do or what Control could actually do. I mean, Bellaba might actually hurt it, especially if they were to get a few switch cards. But out of my experience playing this matchup, it just becomes extremely difficult. So there's a Lily's Pokédoll. Mike was just like, yo, should I do Reset Stamp? Should I go Lily's Pokédoll? Does he have it in his hands? And it comes down to, like, my hand is just too large for me not to get it at this point. Almost like I'm looking at my hand, I'm like, there's so many different ways I could have done it. Let's just go through there because we know we just Giant Hearth the turn before. Nothing in there, so let's just shuffle that back into the deck. Let's go Pokemon Communication. Double check to make sure that there's nothing in there. There's the boss anyways, because I should be intelligent and realize that Eldegoss can grab whatever we want. So we'll bring up the Pokemon with the most retreat cost in case we were to somehow miss it. Attach an energy there in case we need to retreat at any point. And there is the switch allowing us to just bring up the Heatran-GX and taking the knockout on the Magcargo for the win on Mike. And then flip the table because that's the best thing to do in this. Well, okay, that's what we just saw exactly how that game went, and kind of my early predictions worked really well in that matchup. Now, do I feel like our pal Mike didn't get anything really going on? I mean, in a way, I felt like he was a little hesitant on his Belabas, but every single control game is a little bit different. And when we're only playing a best of one format, because I really just want to, not to say I want to run through content, I just want to show you what decks are going to be doing. And I try to keep the channel as real as possible. Not every single match is going to be crystal perfect. I played 100 games with a deck, or that my opponents played 100 games with a deck. Not every single game is going to be the picture perfect matchup. But I think overall the thought process going into that matchup and everything that I did in that matchup was correct for the most part. So I definitely have a higher chance of recommending this deck after playing around with it a little bit. I think it seems better poised than I thought. I thought it would lose to control immediately, to the point where I'm like, I don't even know how I feel about control. But that's another day. That's another video. We'll continue to cover these tabletop simulator based games on this channel until this set becomes released on PTCGO, because the formats can be played on PTCGO. But in the future, we will continue to work with Tabletop Simulator to provide future-based content to all of you. So thank you so much for watching up until this point. Really appreciate it, and be sure to stay around to the end of the video. There's going to be a kind of a link where it's just like, oh, do you want to watch other videos? So feel free to explore the channel a little bit. We are a newer channel here, and I'm not new to YouTube by any means. It's, for me, I'm rebuilding myself, and I'd really appreciate any support that you guys could show just by even just even by watching other videos. So really appreciate it, peeps. Really hope that you enjoyed watching that video. I totally enjoyed making it. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like the video, share the video with everyone that you know, and subscribe to the channel as well. Totally appreciate all the support. We got a lot of cool things happening on the channel, so stay tuned for more. Be sure to check out the social links in the description. Thanks, and have yourself a great one.